Hi, and welcome to my interpersonal communications presentation. Today I will discuss some techniques with you that I have learned to help me enlarge my conversation in an effort to communicate better through listening and talking. Next slide, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Natasha Hill. I am a Christian, a mother, a wife, a sister, and a friend. All of these roles require me to communicate by clearly conveying my thoughts and feelings and empathetically listening well to others. The next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in a stable and loving Christian family with an older sister and both my parents, who have been married now for 39 years. My parents openly communicated with us and encouraged us to express our feelings and our thoughts. However, through the years, the relationship between my sister and I have become challenging. Due to the personality differences and our age differences, we clashed often and didn't get along. I often felt misunderstood and rejected by her, which caused me to shut down and not share my feelings, but rather internalize them. As a result, I do not share my feelings much now when I feel rejected or misunderstood. Over the years, I have experienced many situations, both positive and negative, that affect or influence the way that I communicate. It wasn't until I became a Christian, a mother, and a wife that I realized how vital communication is in relationships, especially within my own home. I work for a government contractor as a human resources manager, and in my role I interact with a variety of people daily and on different platforms. Enlarging my conversation is very important in my profession because I have to be conscious of how I talk and listen to others when I mediate conflict, when I implement policies and procedures, when I conduct trainings and execute disciplinary actions. The next slide, I'm going to discuss my overarching goal. My overarching goal is to improve my talking and listening skills and to gain a better understanding of why I communicate the way that I do, how to better communicate with different people in different situations and environments in an effort to build and maintain healthy relationships. The next slide, I will define communication. Communication is the use of words and behaviors to construct and send and interpret messages. Regardless of the form of communication, whether it be verbal or nonverbal, the communication process requires two people, a sender and a receiver, to bring forth a message. The message sender is responsible for sending the message in a format that can be accurately interpreted by the receiver. Stewart talks about two different types of communication. Interpersonal communication, which is communication that happens when the people involved talk and listen in a way that maximizes the presence of the personal. Then he discusses impersonal communication, which is communication that is based on social rules and exchanges that minimize the presence of the communicator's personal identity. The next slide, I'm going to talk about behavioral blends. Carbonell defines behavioral blends as four consistent basic personality types known as personality type D, I, S, and C behaviors. These temperaments are classified as such. D is active, task-oriented, I is active, people-oriented, C is passive, task-oriented, and S is passive, people-oriented. Everyone is a combination of these four personality types. However, there's no personality type that is better than the other, nor is one bad. The most important factor is that we know what to do with our personalities. We don't let our personality control us. Instead, we must learn to control our personality. The next slide, I'm going to discuss my behavioral blend. My uniquely you assessment revealed that my personality type blend is CS. Some of the positives of my personality type is that I'm a people-oriented person, but I much rather deal with people on a one-on-one scale rather than in group settings. I am not a person who likes to be front and center, but I'd rather be behind the scenes. I am a great friend, a loyal listener, and compassionate towards others. Some of the negatives is that I am reserved and don't often jump into things or express my feelings openly. I can sometimes be a perfectionist and have issues when people say or do things that seem illogical or unreasonable to me. Sometimes this causes me to misjudge or be closed-minded. Overall, I'm a pretty easygoing person, and in some cases people may try to take advantage of me. However, I know how to stand my ground and get my point across when it's necessary. On the next slide, I'm going to discuss my personality type and how it affects my enlarging conversations. My personality type CS, I have to learn to be a little bit more assertive and openly express myself when I'm communicating with others. I don't usually take the initiative to confront certain situations or topics through conversation, but rather I'll wait for someone else to bring it up and then I'll share my feelings. But having a fierce conversation will help me open up. Stewart defines a fierce conversation as one in which we come out from behind ourselves into the conversation and we make it real. According to my interpersonal communication test scores, my communication skills are good. However, listening can be very challenging for me at times because it is a learned behavior that demands energy and discipline. I have to be more conscious of listening to others and not just hearing them or disconnecting from the conversation when it's not of interest to me. Listening to what people say or what they're not saying can also tell me a lot about who they are. According to Burley Allen, listening is taking in information from speakers and others or ourselves while remaining non-judgmental and empathetic. The next slide, I'm going to discuss some of my communication barriers. One of the barriers is perception. My perception of a person or interest in the topic can influence how much I will listen to them. A solution to that would be I must be open-minded to what the speaker is saying, even if I'm not in agreement. I must not allow my perception to build a barrier in how I listen. Another barrier is listening biased, by labeling information unimportant before the speaker can finish their thoughts, and me wanting them to hurry up and get to the point. A solution to that would be I will have to listen to the speaker's entire message without making snap judgments. That will allow me to absorb information and filter non-relevant comments or points. The next slide, I will talk about noise pollution. Noise is unwanted sound that can be produced in many sources. Noise pollution hinders me from listening to others. Some internal distractions will include personal thoughts, feelings, stereotypes, selective hearing, and emotions. Now, my personal noise pollution is tuning others out when their conversation does not interest me, or if I don't really care much for them. External distractions would include loud noises, the room temperature, if it's too cold or too warm, receiving phone calls or making phone calls, and outside scenery. My external noise pollution is movement. When someone's talking to me, for an example, when I'm at work and people come into my office and they're talking to me, I often continue typing or doing whatever I'm doing. I will sometimes have to answer the phone, or sometimes I have music playing. And although I can multitask, not paying full attention can cause me to miss vital information, and it can seem rude to the listener. The next slide, I will discuss some ways and solutions to avoid these noise pollutions. Listening better is one of my areas of improvement, of course. I must give talkers my undivided attention even if I'm not personally interested in their conversation when it comes to my internal noise pollution. In relation to my external noise pollution, I must, when people come into my office while I'm working, stop working and listening to what they're saying. If I'm too busy and can't devote the time to give them my full attention, I will have to ask them to come back later when I am able to give them my attention. Personally, I don't like when people don't give me their undivided attention. Therefore, I must treat others as I would like to be treated. The next slide, I'm going to discuss some plans of actions that will help me communicate better. Peterson designed a talker-listener card that will help me improve my communication skills. According to Peterson, the use of the talker-listener card will open doors to more effective conversations when someone needs to kind of talk and get things over. The talker-listener card is a helpful method that I can use with friends, at work, in my home, and wherever I want to improve communication. When I listen well and wisely, I'll find that people may tend to relax, feel safer with me, and move into a more cooperative mode. Good listening techniques will help me diffuse anger or pleasant, confusing situations. If I listen first, then others will be more ready to listen to me, according to Peterson. Next slide, I will talk a little bit about the talker-listener card. As a talker, I must be able to convey what I'm most bothered by, and I must own my own problem. And my goal is to share my feelings and thoughts without accusing, attacking, labeling, and judging. And as a listener, I must be calm enough to hear, as well as I must realize that I do not own the problem. And the goal in listening is to provide safety, to understand, and to clarify, without agreeing, disagreeing, advising, or defending. Next slide, I'm going to continue on with my plan of action. According to Stewart, perception can be defined as a social cognitive process in which people assign meaning to sensory cues. Perception is a very important part of communication because it allows us to make sense out of what we encounter. In perception, I have to be careful not to judge others by what I perceive, whether it be bad, good, or indifferent. As a believer, I am cautioned about judging others, but rather seeing them as Christ does, by showing compassion. Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 2 tells us, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way that you judge others, you will be judged. And the same measures you use, those measures will be used against you." The next slide, I'm going to continue with my plan of action. And according to Stewart, he talks about betrayal that violates a person's expectations, and that even when the person that is doing the betraying tells the truth, it still hurts. There is a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end of their ways is death. Proverbs 14:12. So sometimes, even though it may seem like it's okay to be deceptive or to betray someone, it's better not to do it. It's important for me to tell the truth, even when it may not be to my advantage. Whosoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who walks in ways crooked will be found out. Proverbs 10:9. So even if I am on the end of being betrayed, rather than harbor negative feelings against the betrayer, I must communicate and make my expectations explicit, and as a Christian, I must walk in forgiveness towards them. The next slide, I will come to my conclusion. Communication is a major part of human living. In an effort for me to build and maintain healthy relationships, I must continue to find ways to communicate effectively with others. Two vital areas that will enable me to be an effective communicator is to continue to work on my talking and listening skills. I must not be afraid to have a fierce conversation or convey my true feelings and thoughts. I must allow others to work out their own problems without trying to fix it or give them advice. I must continue to balance my talking and listening skills so that I don't overtalk or miss key information. This course has taught me a lot about my communication and how it reflects who I am and how others may perceive me. As I continue on my journey of enlarging my conversation, I will examine the motives behind why I communicate the way that I do and how it affects my relationships. This will be a process for me. However, with God, all things are possible. I will continue to seek Him for His wisdom, strength, and guidance. Thank you for tuning into my communication experience and journey.